Kevin Moore here from timba.com with an introduction to Beyond Salsa Bass Volume 1. The original goal of this series was to provide a corresponding bass tumbao for each piano tumbao covered in Beyond Salsa Piano, so that bass and piano students could practice them together and pianists and arrangers could practice playing bass with their left hands. But the bass series quickly became far more ambitious. Some of the volumes are more than 4 times as long as their piano counterparts, with hundreds of tumbaos not covered in the piano series. The bass books also double as a history course as we follow the evolution of the bass tumbao from Africa and Europe to Cuba, Puerto Rico, and New York. Each book begins with a theory chapter before picking up on the chronological survey where the previous one left off. The theory topic for Volume 1 is generic clave-neutral bass tumbaos. I researched this by listening to thousands of pre-timba Latin tracks using the Transcribe and Amazing Slowdowner programs to raise the pitch without raising the tempo.
Monte adentro, monte adentro, monte adentro. Monte adentro.
Listening to music in this way can be enough to drive you crazy, and I'm often told that it has driven me crazy. But as you can hear, it makes the bass tumbaos insanely easy to hear and transcribe. As I worked my way chronologically through the pre-revolution period, I was shocked to discover how many tumbaos could be broken into just 16 categories. It's a 4x4 grid with 4 basic flavors: bolero, son or tresillo, habanera, and guaracha, and each can be played in its pure form, with an anticipated bass, with a doubled ponche, and with both anticipated bass and doubled ponche. Let's take the example of son or tresillo. In Beyond Salsa Bass, we show every tumbao in 5 ways: standard notation in 4/4, as is most common in Cuba, standard notation in 2/2, as is almost universal outside of Cuba, bass tablature, which shows the string and fret numbers, and 2 different types of graphic notation, which is especially valuable for arrangers and those trying to understand how bass tumbaos are constructed and how they align with the other parts of the rhythmic matrix. Here's the pure rhythm. Here it is with anticipated bass. Here it is with doubled ponche. And finally with both anticipated bass and doubled ponche. For each of the 16 generic tumbao types, we show a list of real-world listening examples from Cuban music, salsa, and the North American music that owes so much to Latin rhythms. two's theory chapter, we'll move on to clave-aligned and song-specific tumbaos, as well as the breaks or cierres that are played between tumbaos. Returning to Volume 1, in Chapter 2 we examine the early roots of the bass tumbao from European music like Bach's Passacaglias and Pachelbel's canon. To the pitched drum figures of Afro-Cuban bata and rumba music. But in many ways it was the East Cuban genre of Changüí that proved to be the missing link in the marriage of European chord cycles with Afro-Cuban rhythmic cycles. In our sister volume, we made an extensive study of adapting Changüí tres guajeos to piano. These tres parts were really the first true tumbaos of any type, but Changüí's bass instrument, the kalimba-like marimbula, is closer to a drum than a bass. It produces pitches, but, as in Huahuancó and Bata music, the singers don't try to tune their voices to the pitches of the marimbula. In keeping with our mission statement of providing a bass tumbao for every piano tumbao in Beyond Salsa Piano, I've provided a special appendix of bass tumbaos combining the rhythms of the marimbula parts with notes that work with the Changüí tumbaos of the piano volume. Chapter 3 is on Danzón, the first Cuban genre to be commercially recorded, with the first examples appearing around 1906. Understanding and being able to play Danzón is a basic requirement for professional Latin bassists, so in Chapter 3 we learn the form and feel of Danzón and a complete bass part from the early 1920s. Danzón groups didn't start using bass tumbaos until the innovations of Arsenio and Cachao in the 1940s. This period is studied in great depth in Volume 2. As central as bass tumbaos are to almost all of today's popular music, Latin or otherwise, it's not until the son of the 1920s that we find our first recorded examples of true bass tumbaos. Chapter 4 covers the early Cuban big bands like Casino de la Playa, while Chapter 5 is an extensive survey of the son sextetos and septetos of both Cuba and New York. Chapter 6 is on Arsenio Rodríguez, who reinvented the bass tumbao and popular music in general in many crucial ways. Volume 2 begins with an even longer section on Arsenio. Volume 1 deals with the tumbaos themselves, and Volume 2 with the way they're combined with rhythmic breaks called cierres in the larger form of the arrangement. But the main goal of both of these sections is to savor all the nuances of this supremely important musical genius.
Oh,
la popo po mi ye ye. Oñi ba ye ye wa la popo pa mi ye ye. Popo po mi a la popo.
Beyond Salsa Bass Volume 1 has several appendices. In addition to the aforementioned Changüí appendix, we have 2 extensive glossaries of Cuban musical terms and rhythmic terms, including a short clave tutorial, and 2 sections with tips on demystifying the Spanish language for those of you who, like me, are trying to catch up quickly. Looking ahead, Beyond Salsa Bass Volume 2 has extensive sections on Arsenio, Arcaño, and Cachao, and the golden age of the 1950s, ending just as the Cuban Revolution turned the world of Latin music upside down, a period covered in Volume 3.